News alert, Vice President Kamala Harris willing to do the unthinkable, divide Hurricane Ian victims by race. Was she trying to say she would prefer to help the one she chooses first? The VP with some controversial comments about who should be first in line for relief just days after historic Hurricane Ian hit. I'm Harris Faulkner. You are in the Faulkner Focus. The storm, as you know, was just shy of a Category 5. It tore apart southwest Florida, brought a 500-year flood all the way across the state to cities like Orlando last week. At least 80 people so far confirmed dead. Damage estimated to be in the billions of dollars, and with so many people in shock and heartbroken. Here's a word from the second in command in the White House.
It is our lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. So we have to address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity.
The backlash was immediate. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign tweeted, "This is false. The VP's rhetoric is causing undue panic and must be clarified. FEMA, individual assistance, is already available to all Floridians impacted by Hurricane Ian, regardless of race or background." South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace with this.
It's literally the definition of discrimination. Hurricanes don't see color. Hurricanes don't see political affiliation. Hurricanes don't see gender. All they see is destruction along the coast where they hit. And it is incredibly racist. Can you imagine someone saying the exact opposite, that only whites and men should get hurricane resources first? I mean, that's crazy town. And the fact that the Vice President of the United States is making those kinds of comments shows a lack of leadership.
Peter Ducey is live for us outside the White House, wondering if any comment has come with regard to this. Peter.
No, Harris, and the vice president had a chance to clarify what she meant in this comment that sounds like race-based relief from the hurricane, but she didn't. Well, now Republicans in the Florida delegation are wishing that she would set this politically charged rhetoric aside.
Listen, I couldn't disagree more with the vice president. Now is not the time to be talking about who gets what based upon where you started. It's about helping people, making sure they get the resources they need as quickly as possible, helping them recover as quickly as possible. That's what matters. That other stuff can wait for another day.
And President Biden has been striking a different tone, tweeting the following: "This is not just a crisis in Florida or in South Carolina or in Puerto Rico. It is a United States crisis. We'll do everything we can to get these communities back on their feet." And there's nothing about equity coming from the FEMA director either.
Less impact. We're going to support all communities. I committed that to the governor. I commit to you right here that all Floridians are going to be able to get the help that is available to them through our programs.
So she is in charge of the relief, and she's talking about all Floridians. That is different than what we're hearing from the vice president in that comment. Harris.
Peter Ducey, thank you very much. We'll get into it now with Will Cain, co-host in Fox and Friends Weekend. First of all, your top line response when you first heard this from the vice president of the United States.
Simultaneously shocking but unsurprising. You can't be surprised that this type of language was coming from the White House, from the second most powerful person in the United States, because this type of language, Harris, has been employed throughout governmental policy for quite some time. You know, I heard Nancy Mace in the clip you just played describe this as crazy town. It's not crazy town. It's immoral. What I mean by that is it is not simply sloppy. It is not simply uncalculated. It is a predictable guidance, a principle to which the Democratic Party has now subscribed, that you should divide people according to their race. They do it with government contracts. They do it with educational opportunities. I can go down, and by the way, this word equity, and I appreciate the vice president distinguishing it from equality. Equality, the idea that we all aspire to a society where we're judged by our merit and our individual. No, she sets that aside and says we have to strive for equity, which means we start to filter each other through the prism of race. I can go down the street, Harris. I can go to my children's school, and they've incorporated that concept into their guiding principles. And it is, without a doubt, immoral. It is racist. And the president and the vice president of the United States, I guess now, that makes it unsurprising. I guess now what makes it shocking is they're willing to apply it to the most dire of circumstances, a natural disaster. But make no mistake, this is predictable, and this is one of their guiding principles, to be racist.
I want to get into it a little bit on this point, because you and I talk brass tacks all the time. So I'm just going to be really transparent here. Her husband is white, and so is mine. She's biracial, I'm black. If our white husbands lost one of us, they would cry as hard as if a black husband lost his black wife. It's just that basic. So divide and conquer along the lines of politics is what this feels like. Because as human beings, it's very hurtful.
I mean, that's that word you used at the end, human beings. Why is there such difficulty in seeing one another as human beings, as individuals? That's why I'm telling you, it's morally abhorrent. And again, a natural disaster, I guess, highlights it for many. It's morally abhorrent to say we need to divide each other by race. And then also, by the way, for the purpose of employing a Marxist ideology, which she again lays out. You don't need me to somehow, filter this into something that it's not. She lays it out. She says the goal of equity is to arrive at equal outcomes. Equality is doing our best to achieve equal opportunity. She wants to use racism, segregationist policies to ensure we arrive at equal outcomes. Thus is equity. And thus, just to tie it into your final observation there, Harris, thus is the denial of us as individuals and ultimately as human beings.
Exactly. We all have our own path. And by the way, so did Hurricane Ian. So if he takes one of us away from someone who loves us, the hurricane didn't pick me because I was black or pick her potentially because she was biracial. And the hurricane didn't know that someone white might mourn us or someone black might mourn us. It doesn't work that way. Yeah. And those victims left behind don't deserve something based on the color of their skin or the lack thereof. Your last quick thought on this will move.
My last quick thought is just, again, understand. It's calculated and it's purposeful, and therefore it's immoral.
All right, we'll move. The Biden administration getting bombarded with hundreds of thousands of comments from parents since President Biden proposed changes to Title IX. A big part of that law aims to protect women and girls in sports. The president this summer said he wants to strengthen the rights of transgender students and athletes who use Title IX. The Department of Education now has to review every single response. A member of a girls' volleyball team at a Vermont high school says the team has been banned from using girls' locker rooms. It comes after they objected to changing clothes in the presence of a transgender student. Caitlyn Jenner weighed in today.
The left has hijacked and politicized yet another minority group in our wonderful country, and all they're doing is driving this apart. Now, does this trans girl have the right under Vermont law to be on the team and to use the locker room? Yes, she does. Do these girls have the right to comment? Absolutely they do. Honestly, everything is out of whack right now, and these things have to stop.
One thing Caitlyn has told me when we had her here in Focus is that we've got to come up with a way to do some sort of separate but equal. Like you've got to create something that makes everybody feel not just comfortable, but safe in their space. She doesn't know how you do that, but she thinks that's where we need to go.
Well, look, Harris, I think that you can overcomplicate what is, in the end, a biological fact. And it just doesn't matter what you choose to call yourself. Your genetic components and God have defined for reality what you are. And the laws of man have to follow some objective truth. And you can't have a boy who calls himself a girl force all the girls out of the girls' locker room. This is insanity. I can't believe I'm having to say this. Force, 10 girls out of the girls' locker room because they're uncomfortable. One would be able to perceive why they might be uncomfortable.
Yes.
In order to allow him to warp objective reality to his desires. If he doesn't want to go to the boys' locker room, how about apparently all 10 of these girls in Vermont had to go to a stall, a single stall, and take turns changing while he had the entire locker room for himself? How about common sense says reverse that? You go to the privacy of a single bathroom and you leave the locker room, well, to the girls. You and I are having a conversation that I can't believe is one we're having that's somehow political. This is not complicated. Human beings have understood the differences between men and women for millennia, and somehow we can't get it straight in modern America.
Well, I know Caitlin says she doesn't speak for everybody, but she's talking about what you're saying. I mean, create something separate for those individuals who are transgender. But, you know, we're all up in our feelings in the woke days. And the feeling is you accommodate the minority number first, number, not person, but number first, until you can figure out how to fix it for everybody. And it leaves us kind of in this nebulous point, and that's why these parents are speaking up. And when I say speaking up, they're going to have a lot of letters to read. Will Kane, thank you. Oh, real quick.
All right, thank you, Harris.
I
was just going to say, and yesterday's unfashionable minority is cast to the side. Feminism is yesterday's empathy, yesterday's compassion. Today's is trans. Where is the principle? What is the guiding light? Only what is fashionable, it seems, for many on the left and the progressives, and where they fight.
Yeah, if only they could just look for answers instead of winning via politics and using everybody as potential victims. It's immoral, as you say, even though they say they take the high ground on that. Will Kane, good to see you always in focus. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.
Crime is on the ballot. Have no doubt about it. When voters head to the polls 36 days from now, the issue plaguing Democrats on the campaign trail is red hot. Jason rants on what it will mean for the Democratic majorities in Congress, and Democrats dodging this very simple question.
In your opinion, is the border secure?
I have to go give a speech.
Do you believe the border is secure?
Well, I believe that we have to have a secure border.
Do you agree with the administration that the border is secure?
Bill Mnuchin has been watching the crisis unfold on the border for nearly 2 years. What he discovered during his visit to Washington: 1 million people apprehended, processed, many released into the country by the Biden administration since President Biden took office. Now, startling new information on the illegal immigrants who have evaded capture, the gotaways. New research digging down into the nearly 1 million gotaways, as they're called, who sneaked into our nation since President Biden took office. One high-profile Democrat will go on the record about it. Congressman of Texas, Henry Cuellar, said the Biden administration needs to step up and that the border is not secure. Here's what he said in Focus last week.
What I want to see is have more personnel, Border Patrol down there coordinating with the local police. We need to have technology, cameras, like the cameras that DPS has. But the most important thing is we need to look at the repercussions. If you don't deport people, then they're going to see the border as a speed bump. We have to deport people. We have to deport people, the ones that are not supposed to be here.
I reminded him there that the White House is not listening, apparently. Bill Mnuchin is here. He has reported from the border since the start of the Biden presidency and has more now from Washington, D.C., where, Bill, I know that you've gone to get some answers from Democrats and the administration officials who so far aren't saying much. In fact, the silence is deafening.
Harris, good morning to you. That's exactly right. Look, the administration has repeatedly insisted the border is secure. That's despite the fact that under them there have been record illegal crossings, record numbers of gotaways, and record numbers of migrant deaths. And we have witnessed much of this chaos ourselves in person during our coverage of the border. So we came here to D.C. and we're looking for some answers. 250,000 unaccompanied migrant children arrived at the border since President Biden took office. Some of them trafficked, some of them drowning in the river. Any issue with that?
You gotta get the votes, man. You can shoot me a note right there. That.
Last question, ma'am. Is the border secure? Do you agree with the administration that the border is secure? We'll let you go. Chairman, one question. In your opinion, is the border secure?
I have to go give a speech. Didn't you hear me?
I heard you. Okay. It's a quick question. Is the border secure?
Answers about the border few and far between from some Democrats on Capitol Hill, including the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas.
I'm Bill Malugin with Fox News. Do you have a few moments to talk about the border real quick?
I'm sorry, I don't.
A week before this, we sent this email to DHS, notifying them we would be in D.C. and we were requesting an interview with the Secretary. We received no response, so we went to him.
A few moments of your time is all we're asking for, and we'll let you go. Reached out to your office, asked to talk to you last week. They blew us off.
I appreciate it.
It's 900,000 gotaways.
Have a good day. Thank you.
No comment, sir?
Only Democrats from the state of Texas, the front line of the border crisis, ended up talking to us, and they expressed concern about the border.
This is unsustainable. It has been unsustainable for years.
We have resources down there, but we clearly need to be doing more.
This is our administration. I'm a Democrat. And, they need to understand they own it now. They own it now, and they have to take the steps to correct this. Otherwise, when are we going to see an end to this?
We also put questions to Democratic leadership.
Do you believe the border is secure?
Well, I believe that we have to have a secure border, and I think that we are trying to address, the president has a plan to address that.
Democrats have had majority control here in D.C. for almost 2 years now, and still there has been no significant progress on any immigration legislation in the Senate. I asked Chuck Schumer why that's the case.
Republicans don't want to do immigration reform, even on something as simple as DACA, which has the overwhelming support of the American people. Republicans are blocking it.
Under Republicans, would amnesty of any kind for any group of these migrants who have come across ever be on the table?
No amnesty. I know if Nancy Pelosi was no longer here, there'd be a lot of Democrats that would feel free to do exactly what they know is best, to vote for a secure border and work with us to have a real immigration reform.
And Harris, Minority Leader McCarthy went on to tell me that if Republicans do end up retaking the majority after the midterms and he becomes the Speaker of the House, he says he would not move to immediately try to impeach DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He said Republicans' priority would be legislating border security in particular. We'll send it back to you.
Bill, just real quickly, I have a question about some of the people you're talking with. Under Obama, who got the moniker Deporter-in-Chief. I mean, Henry Cuellar told me that last week on the special. He said, look, Obama deported more people than really anybody. And this is how divided Democrats are. They didn't want to talk about that. They actually surreptitiously wouldn't comment on that either. And it was on their watch. So if they really wanted to solve this, why didn't they do it when they had bicameral majorities? It's a fair question, too. I'm glad you're there.
Yeah, it is a fair question, and Henry Cuellar actually told us very similar to what he told you. He said he wants this administration to not only deport more migrants, but actually show images of those deportations. Right. He said it's important to show the migrants around the world that if you come here illegally and you file a fraudulent asylum claim or you're not here for a legitimate reason, you're going to get sent back. He says right now the administration is removing people, they just don't want to show it, and he says that's a problem.
Well, and we had to dig to find out about Obama's situation, former President Obama's situation, because that also was rather surreptitious. It was very quiet because politically explosive, I would imagine, for Democrats at any time, any date on the calendar for them. Bill, thank you very much. Appreciate it. You set us up for a great conversation here. Jason Rance, radio talk show host for KTTH in Seattle. Jason, really at a very simplistic level, and Cuellar saying it, of course, we both agreed Washington, D.C. is not listening to him, but others, too, from both sides of the aisle, can't miss the fact that we need to enforce our laws.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think part of the reason why Democrats don't want to say that part out loud is because they know that they are not living up to that expectation from the American people. They've told us this entire time that there's not a crisis at the border, that it's completely secure, and that sure, every once in a while someone gets through, but it's not really an issue, so much so that our border czar doesn't actually have to go and visit the border. So when they say that, they realize that they can't walk that back because they'll be called, rightly so, liars. And they're doing this all for politics. And I'm glad there are some folks on the Democrat side, and it's not just Cuellar, some others are speaking up and saying that this is important. It's just unfortunate that we have to get to a midterm elections where this is clearly an issue to get some of them to actually speak up.
So I interviewed and what we're looking at right now was a busted up suspected smuggling ring. And there were Americans who were in the car driving who are the suspects in this, picking up illegals already dressed in camo, which the cartel tells them to wear so that they can hide out until they're picked up. Yep. So I wanted to explain the exclusive video that you're seeing to the left. But, you know, what's also complicated about this has to do with the fact that if there's any compunction to do this, it only comes 36 days out to deal with it from a midterm election. And there's no plan or anything. It's just that a few people on the left are willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I think every single person who's watching right now has heard some politicians say it's time to get a hold of immigration.
What does that even mean?
Comprehensive immigration reform. I don't know, because whatever it means, clearly it means something different to you and I and to everyone who's watching than the actual politicians who are saying it, because you can't tell me over and over and over again for decades that we need comprehensive immigration reform and yet do literally nothing. Democrats have had control of every branch of our government before, multiple times. They've done nothing. The Republicans are stepping up and saying we need to have a secure border. And then you have Chuck Schumer out there throwing out DACA as if that has anything to do with the current crisis that's happening at our border. It does not. I think there's a lot of room to have conversations about DACA and movement. However, that is not the crisis. We have people who are coming to the country and we don't even know what they're doing.
900,000 of them. 900,000 of them who did not want to be counted. We also can't keep up with the ones who said they did want to be counted. They don't always show up for their court dates, and there are millions of them. All right, let's go to this. Violent crime raging out of control in liberal-led cities and weighing heavily now on the midterm elections 36 days away. So here's another topic that Democrats are jumping in now to talk about. Wow. A warning that some of the images we're about to show you are graphic and disturbing. They're not talking.
Somebody like this to be in the street, who's the person who's supposed to be making sure he's inside and getting treated because of the negligence and keeping us safe and making sure we have the proper security that we need in our city, that something like this have to happen. An innocent person have to lose their eyesight.
Elizabeth, we pray for your recovery. A blistering headline in the Washington Examiner reads this way: Democrats have earned their soft on crime reputation. When you ask them, it's crickets, though.
You do, although I know that DA Larry Krasner from Philadelphia came out and said, actually, we're doing a bang-up job. It is amazing here, but go to some of the MAGA states. It is a wonderful sleight of hand, because they'll point to stats that show Missouri is the #1 state for violent crime. Yeah, it's being driven by the Democrat-run cities, Kansas City and St. Louis, which account for almost half of all of the homicides in the entire state. So we clearly know what's to blame. They are reluctant to say anything because they believe, I think, that this is justified, this pain, in the short term, because their long-term plan is to reimagine public safety, which in the short term means we're less safe, but they think in the long term means this utopia of anti-racist policies that will change the criminal justice system for the better. It is clearly not working, and voters are taking notice.
Yeah, well, look, even Jen Psaki, former White House press secretary for Joe Biden, said, back him. If you stay yoked to him, you're in trouble. And pay attention to crime, by the way. So we'll see what happens. Jason Rantz, always great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.
Biden's student loan bailout now testing the trust of voters. Why he's backtracking on his big promise to pay for everything. Well, what's that going to do in the midterm elections for all those Democrats who were hanging on to that?
Are down, the ceilings have all dropped down, the water level is above the roof. The whole thing is, this is everything we could salvage. It's our lives.
Right now, we have to go with the motion. We have no idea. There's no power, no water.
I was just devastated seeing what was happening to the property and to my neighbor's place downstairs, and it was hard to comprehend.
It is so hard to comprehend. Tragedy in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian. Lives and entire communities are destroyed. Officials confirming now from Ian so far at least 80 deaths confirmed. The toll is expected to rise. We're told more than 1,600 people have had to be saved by search and rescue teams. First responders say there's still a backlog of more than 500 more addresses to get to. Cleanup getting underway in some of the hardest hit areas. Many in Fort Myers Beach have lost everything. Officials say Sanibel Island is flattened, and of course we know getting on and off the island via what you see on the right part of your screen, well, that's going to take a long time to fix if you want to get on and off in a vehicle. Senator Marco Rubio is outlining the state's response.
I think it now starts becoming more about search and recovery. And then, of course, begins the process of rebuilding to the extent possible, which will take years. Some of these Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, I mean, they'll never look the same again. These communities have basically been, wiped out.
Phil Keating, live in Fort Myers, Florida. And Phil, I know as you're out there, you're talking to a lot of people. What's going on for people out there?
Well, I will say this, Harris. Life is slowly improving here in extremely hard-hit Lee and Charlotte counties. Tens of thousands of people have come here. Not here are more grocery stores open, restaurants are opening, and more gas stations. But here, people can pull up desperate boxes of free meals to eat, a couple of bottles or cases of water, and of course, somebody that has no electricity desperately cannot make at home, and that is ice. So everybody gets 2 or 3 bags of ice, and they say that's one of the highest in demand. Over the weekend, especially Friday and Saturday in particular, extremely busy with super long lines of cars and trucks restocking their dwindling pre-hurricane supplies. The National Guardsmen and women tell me they're just happy to help. Many have been coming here every single day. It's been their only option, and they are so thankful.
We're getting what we need to survive, but these guys are awesome. It helps so much.
I am so incredibly gracious. I come every single day, but yesterday we had no ice here, and I'm so happy to be able to give my 90-year-old parents ice.
Fox News flew yesterday with the National Guard over the worst of the destruction on the devastated barrier islands of Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, and Pine Island. Those islands no longer have bridge access for residents, although at this point the city manager in Sanibel estimates the number of residents remaining there at this point probably under 100. Today's line here is much smaller than it has been. I guess that's a positive sign, at least the Guard believes so, that people are less in need at this point. It's day 5 after Cat 4 Hurricane Ian. As for the electricity, the power, 95% of Lee County went without power immediately during the storm. Today, that number is 55%, so things are certainly slowly improving on the electricity front thanks to those thanks to those 40,000 utility workers who have been working round the clock.
Talk to me, if you will, about what people are doing just in terms of where they're staying right now if they're out of their homes. Are those shelters still filling up? Are there any other sort of alternatives for them right now? Hotels opening up? Anything that they can get to?
Exactly. So slowly but surely, the hotels and motels are opening up, getting the supplies they need and the staff they need, because a lot of their staff first had to deal with the hurricane, the cleanup, and all of that. So people are either friends or they have been able to return back home. Clearly, the people on the barrier islands, they cannot return back home right now. And the bridge connecting Pine Island, they're building a temporary one this week. They're rushing the job because the old one is simply going to have to be rebuilt.
Yeah, well, that can't happen for Sanibel's Causeway because that is a really long stretch of road that they will have to, well, the governor has said it'll take a while to get that back. I'm so glad to see the clean drinking water down there and people are able to pick that up. Phil, you and I had talked last week that was going to be critical. God bless them there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Harris.
The Red Cross is on the ground in Florida, and it's leading efforts to help people there recover and rebuild. Fox Corporation has donated $1 million to the organization in support of its incredible work. Fox is also double matching employee donations to Red Cross hurricane relief efforts, including Ian and Fiona. If you want to help people affected by this historic storm, visit redcross.org/foxforward. To politics now. Both the Democrats and Republicans laying into President Biden after he quietly walked back part of his massive student loan handout. Hundreds of thousands of borrowers are now ineligible for that bailout. The New York Post editorial board put it this way. In reality, Biden's rollout of his forgiveness program and his touting of it since is one big charade. The point isn't just that you better not count on a dime in loan relief. It's that you can't trust anything Team Biden says it will do or has done. Fox Business's Edward Lawrence is live with more. All right, he giveth and then he scraped it off the table.
Yeah, exactly. He's scaling back the program is what's happened. 770,000 people will be left out of that program. Now, we've seen the numbers associated with this. The Federal Reserve actually estimates, their research estimates, it's $441 billion is what taxpayers will pay for this. The Congressional Budget Office is saying $400 billion. Now, the president fighting back, defiant, defending his campaign promise, no matter the cost.
We can afford to cancel $10,000 in student debt and $20,000 if you had a Pell Grant. For Americans making under $125,000. I don't want to hear a word from those members of Congress, if you notice, whose families got tens of thousands of dollars and several $1 million in pandemic relief loan forgiveness. The same ones criticizing. Give me a break. Come on.
Shaming others, but it still costs taxpayers. The president moving forward with the plan regardless of the criticism and the lawsuits. Applications will be taken by the Department of Education at some point this month. The application period will run through December of next year. Republicans say this is just more unnecessary spending.
The American people need a check and balance against a reckless, extreme, far-left agenda that's been promoted by this administration and their leadership in the Congress. There's no question in my mind that the American people are going to be looking for something that says we want to go in a different direction.
Yeah, but no big changes in Biden's policies over energy or even student loan relief. Back to you, Harris.
So the American public is saving $41 billion, but it's still $400 billion. I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, it's very expensive. I mean, and it depends on who you're looking at. You know, Congressional Budget Office has not been corrected. Some of the revenues they believe will come in associated with this. It's all guesstimation work. So yeah, somewhere between 441 and 400 billion. Still a lot of money.
It is a lot of our money.
Yeah.
Yes. Edward Lawrence, thank you. The midterm elections are getting closer, and Democrats may be getting more worried. What new polling shows about Senate races in particular in two key battleground states? And former President Bill Clinton with this stern warning to people on the left on what could sink them in November. Power Panel next.